Hey, welcome investors to the 40 Finance channel. Today I'm going to talk about Etsy stock. This is a stock that I own in my portfolio and kind of surprised me recently that I took a look at my returns on Etsy. It's actually hovering in the 88% area right now. Most of the shares that I bought are in that 150 level, and Etsy today stands at 278. Really only owned this stock for about a year or so. So it's been a really good one. And if you follow the channel or if you follow Etsy stock, incredible management, very, very thoughtful in the way that they make moves and acquisitions. The only question for Etsy stock today is not really like the quality of the company. Where I get a little nervous is just where the valuation sits in general. So we'll talk about all those things for Etsy stock. And as always, if you enjoy this content, please give a like, subscribe to the channel, all the things. Thank you very much for your support. All right, and this is just a sort of my stocks by market value. Actually, I haven't updated this list. I have a couple more shares of Visa and a couple more shares of PayPal that I purchased on their recent weakness. But you see market value for Etsy, my 50 shares at a cost basis of $146 now translates to almost $14,000. On this screen anyway, it says 90% gain. The stock's actually up a little bit. So Etsy out of the blue wasn't really one that I came into saying like, I want this to be my top position, but that is exactly what it's grown into depending on the day and what the shares are selling for. Let's take a look at the stock today. Price at 278. Here's your 1-year chart. Last year at this time, you're at $140. They had a great holiday season. Then obviously in the summer, there was a lot of questions about the future of Etsy. Where does it go in the summer lull? America reopening, etc., etc. And then now that we've crept into fall and they've continued to outperform expectations on most levels, it's starting to creep back up because what do we have right now? We are in Q4, holiday season. If you know anything about Etsy, handmade items, craft items, stuff for the home, unique, creative things, this is high tide for the type of marketplace that Etsy is. And I think with e-commerce sales continuing to grow and an advantage that you have with a stock like Etsy, as much as we hear about supply chain disruptions and whatnot, I'm not sure that that really applies to the individual sellers that are on Etsy. Now, I'm sure they may have supply chain issues, but they're not branded goods, right? You're not looking for a PlayStation 5 made by PlayStation, comes from the PlayStation factory. No, you go to Etsy for inspiration, right? You're looking for a gift for dad, right? A sweater for your dog. These things, you don't really care necessarily who makes them. You might have favorite sellers. But with that in mind, I would say that the supply chain disruption that a lot of vendors see maybe doesn't apply to Etsy as a whole. And the other thing on that point is Etsy as itself is just a marketplace. So they're pushing whoever is selling the most, right? For some sort of algorithm that figures out what you like, which sellers are getting good reviews. They pump all that through the system. So if you had a seller who's having a down year or doesn't have the right inventory to sell, they just sink down in the marketplace. And those who have been able to persevere through this creep up, and Etsy just maximizes their profits as a marketplace. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the highlights from the last earnings call. You had 17% gross merchandise sales up year over year. So that's good. With a company like Etsy and the valuation that it trades at, though, you probably want to be able to see in the 20 plus percentage going into Q4. Again, I think you take Q3 with a mild grain of salt just because it's not really key time, but it's all going to be about Q4 going forward. But I'll say the real win for Etsy is just they're really ramping up their buyer loyalty. and they're making some good technology plays that set a strong foundation for the future. You can see this gross merchandise sales per active buyer, how much that has went up in just 1 year from 110 to 132. So people are coming back to the platform through not only just interest and organic desire, and they've always had a very strong digital marketing strategy, across email, retargeting ads, notifications, and such. So this is a very healthy metric that you would assume, anyway, would grow even stronger in Q4. Here's a slide here on how they have improved the expected delivery date accuracy. So, and that's obviously going to be important this year as a lot of deliveries are going to be sort of missing or very slow. At least that's what I would anticipate with the lack of labor and supply chain issues here in America. And what they're really trying to do here is get to a place of full reliability. Now, I would argue that they are already very reliable, but you can see here where they've cut in half the number of shipments that arrive after their estimated delivery date, and they're also offering buyers these new targets, which has helped just in general with satisfaction. And sometimes it's hard to put an actual value on customer satisfaction, but when you want to run a marketplace like this, it is essential. Here they talk about how they're pushing people towards their app and how well that's done. 36% increase in app downloads, higher repeat visit and purchase rate, increase in favoriting, increase in listing views. And as we all know with these apps, the big gain for most people or most companies is just the fact that you get the notifications. You can make updates on products. Let's just say a price goes on sale or the price drops. All those things can actually lead to an increase in gross merchandise volume, and that's kind of what we're seeing here with Etsy. All right, and last thing here from the investor report, this isn't really new news, but in case you didn't know, we obviously have the Etsy website and app. Did you know also, though, that in the past year they've purchased Reverb, which is used musical instruments, basically an eBay of sorts for musical instruments, but only musical instruments. They also recently purchased Debop, which is used fashion goods. This was a European-based company. I can't remember exactly what region, but the whole purpose is like you're seeing out there with some of these other apps where, you might have a valuable purse or coat or something like that you paid big dollars for, and then this is a marketplace where you can effectively sell that and get money for fashion items that you're simply not using anymore. And then Elo7, this is a Brazilian marketplace. It's all handmade products from Brazil. Haven't actually looked at this one myself, but that was another acquisition that eBay made here over the past maybe 6 months or so. All right, now let's jump into Etsy's projections and think a little bit more about their fundamentals. And we'll use Seeking Alpha here. And we have December 2021. This is for EPS. And with Etsy, if they hit the 361, which is the consensus, you have a 241 low and a 421 high. That would be a 13% growth in EPS going forward. That brings your forward PE to 75.31. Now, if we start focusing on December of 2022, the EPS goes up, another 13% or so. Could be as high as 525, low as 328. That's where analysts are guessing. But that puts your forward PE at 66. And for all intensive purposes, December of the 2022 fiscal year is essentially the forward PE mark as far as I'm concerned, because we're right in the middle of Q4 right now. Let's take a look at revenue, which is arguably more important right now with Etsy. You have this fiscal period, $2.3 billion. That's 33% growth this year if they hit that number. Price of sales 15 times. Next year, we see a drop in revenue growth from 33% down to about 20%. That still brings your forward price to sales down at today's price. It puts it about 12, but you do have to go out to December of 2024. And, it's hard to really figure what those estimates would be at that time. But if they landed at 4 billion, you would finally get price to sales under 10x. So not necessarily a cheap stock by any stretch of the imagination, but I think the positives, though, are that you're dealing with a stock that does have earnings per share. They are a profitable company, and they're continuing to build, right? They're still young, and they're competing in a space that's growing, which, of course, is e-commerce. They also have some international plays that kind of have yet to develop. They're launched, but they're not on the same par with the success we've seen in the United States. All right, so for this segment, we're going to compare Etsy to Chewy, Wayfair, and eBay. Obviously, Chewy and Wayfair are probably your closest comparisons because they're both new companies, and they both kind of got that pandemic boost that put them on a new trajectory, basically skipped a few years of growth and went right into the mainstream. eBay, on the other hand, is going to be much more comparable in terms of operations, profit margins, things like that, because eBay doesn't make items, just like Etsy doesn't make items. They just house the marketplace. So we'll go down the list and see what we got here. As far as Seeking Alpha's Quant Scores, quant rating is neutral for Etsy, bearish, neutral. Wall Street analyst, bullish, neutral on Wayfair, bullish on eBay. All right, now I'm just going to skip ahead to valuation here. And if we take non-GAAP earnings, just so that we have the closest comparison to everybody on the list, P non-GAAP fiscal year 1, Etsy at 75. That would be this year, by the way. Chewy at 838, Wayfair at 96, eBay at 1864. So eBay, obviously the better value. What you're going to see with eBay is, they have more EPS. They have less growth because they've gotten so big. If we go down to forward GAAP EPS, Etsy at 87, Chewy in the thousands, Wayfair doesn't even have a GAAP EPS, and eBay sits at about 30. Now, if we take a look at PEG ratio, price over earnings growth, this is non-GAAP, 291, nothing for Chewy, 12 times for Wayfair, under 2 for eBay. On a GAAP level, for whatever reason, only Etsy snuck in there with a GAAP level of 1. All right, how about price to cash flow here? 57x for Etsy, 99 for Chewy, 51 for Wayfair, and eBay just under 15. Now let's just go straight revenue growth here. Year over year, so this is looking backwards. Etsy plus 61, Chewy 37, Wayfair under 10%, and eBay at 35. Now if we talk about the forward revenue growth, which would be next year, some projections, Etsy at 50%, Chewy at 30, Wayfair at 19, and you can see eBay kind of stalls out. Then if we want to do 5-year CAGR, which I would argue is very, very difficult to try to put that number together, but how about at 45% for Etsy, no calculation for Chewy, Wayfair at 35, eBay at 5%. Go down to EPS, diluted 3-year outlook, 73% for Etsy. These guys don't have a calculation. You can see Chewy's a little light on all the calculations. Haven't stared too deeply at Chewy. It just could be because perhaps they're not profitable yet, and or they're just expecting to turn an earnings per share out maybe this year or next year. So that's usually why you see these as blank. Now let's get down to the profitability on a transaction scale. So gross profit margin for Etsy, 73%. Chewy and Wayfair, because they're retailers, they're down here just sub 30%. That's not necessarily a negative thing. It's just a different business model. You can see that Etsy barely beats out eBay. They're, of course, the closest comparison between each other. If we get an EBITDA margin, 25% for Etsy, 29, 30-ish% for eBay, and the others in single digits. All right, lastly, let's just compare a balance sheet. Total cash, eBay 800 million, Chewy 725, Wayfair 2.39 billion, and eBay sits at the top with, almost 15 billion there. Cash per share, Etsy $6.44, Etsy or Chewy at $1.74, Wayfair at 22, eBay at 23. Total debt, $2.32 billion for Etsy. Chewy looks like the lowest, sub 500 million. Wayfair, $3.92 billion. eBay, almost $10 billion. But when you look at it from a net debt, so when you sort of take cash or debt minus cash, you have Etsy and Wayfair standing out as the top losers, so to speak, at $1.5 billion. Chewy's in the positive. That looks negative, but it's net debt, so negative is actually positive. And eBay sits at the top, obviously longer, more established company. So at least on this board, Etsy and Wayfair running a little bit higher than their competition on debt. And I think, in Etsy's defense, they just acquired 2 or 3 different new platforms. So hopefully that will start to trickle down into cash flow here sooner than later. But it's definitely something to watch. All right, so where do we think Etsy stock will go from here? Take a look at TipRanks very quickly. We have a number of updates over the past 12 days when Etsy released their earnings. And you have buys. So notice that from a positional standpoint, you have buy, 1 hold. There's actually 2 holds if you scroll down a little bit further. But the upside looks limited at its current price. You've got a lot of small single-digit downside, and then you have a couple here. The hold has a price target of $195. And there's only 1 upside, $285 price target, which is just 2% or so up from today. All right, so honest truth about Etsy, I think it's a phenomenal company, and I think they pressed all the right buttons, and I think they continue to build a strong foundation. Where I think this stock is, as far as a fork in the road, is just, do you want to sell now, potentially take all your top profits while you can? It's something I have to consider at this percentage point. Or do you want to commit to a much longer hold, right? Let's just say 3 to 5 years from this point. Because it would not surprise me if we got past Q4 and into spring and summer of next year that we start to see a chunk get bit out of the current stock price for Etsy. Now, I have no reservations that they're going to blow it out in Q4, but for myself, I have to think about what makes more sense, locking in the gains today or perhaps facing a year-ish of static prices where I don't make any more gains. It's a tough one because I really do like the company. At least in my world, I'm not going to buy any more Etsy right now for the foreseeable future. And looking ahead, I'm going to read some more opinions about it and make the decision, should I stick with Etsy for the long haul or should I lock in profits in what looks like a volatile market that could seriously sway either way over the next 2 or 3 months. All right, guys, let me know what you think of Etsy stock below. As always, please give a like, subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching. We'll see you on the next one.